Hello and welcome to the instalment of the Wyfutbol podcast with me, Michael Dryden and Etchers Adogru. This week, as the rumours have resurfaced around a 39th Premier League game being played abroad, we take a look at past rumours, the new potential proposals, the pros and cons, and we'll discuss whether it is likely to ever happen. Before we start, please follow us on Twitter at Yfootball_ and subscribe with us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Acast, and YouTube. Good evening, Etchers. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm not bad. Obviously, to those listening in, WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram is down. And I was thinking, right, like 40 years ago, and you said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to meet at the restaurant at 7:30."
Yeah.
what what happens when what happens when you're just like you just don't rock up because for a legitimate reason, like I don't know, like you got beaten up or something. Like you're just going to be standing there like
Yeah.
a lemon for like 2 hours.
I've often wondered that because that could actually be a relationship ender. You just don't turn up.
Like you have no idea. Like you literally could be standing there, and then you look like a dickhead. But it's like, oh, would you like a drink? No, no, I'm waiting for my friend. He'll be here in about 10 minutes. And then you're there 2 hours later, and they're like, oh, would you still like a drink? Like, no, no, no. They'll be here soon. And then you leave. You leave shrouded in shame. And let me think about it now because I was trying to contact you obviously to sort the episode out tonight, and yeah, obviously we could still call, but yeah, I was thinking, yeah, what would happen if or what would happen or what did happen, sorry, like 40 years ago. That's what was on my mind instead of talking about football because Arsenal didn't do very well. Oh, we got a draw, but not the end of the world. Anyway, how you doing, Jordan?
I mean, I'm not brilliant, to be fair. I went to Pompey on Saturday to see Sunderland against Pompey, and we got battered 4-0. Bear in mind, at the start of the season, we were unreal. We basically, before that game, were top of the league. Won 5-0 against Cheltenham on Tuesday night at home, flying, and we get battered 4-0. It's one of those games though where so they stopped the game after 60 minutes because the conditions were that bad. Like it was like horizontal rain, you couldn't really see because of the rain. There was pools of water on the pitch where the ball was getting stuck. It wouldn't even like move along the surface. And Lee Johnson, our manager, is like, League One's answer to Pep Guardiola. He's like instilled this no kicking it long approach. Like our goalkeeper, defenders instructed no long balls at all. I suppose unless it's like a must. So we're trying to play this like Pep football, tiki taka, and the ball's not even moving. And they were playing direct, and we got battered. Like one of the worst I've seen us get battered ever.
That's a shame. I mean, you know what? You needed for that game. You needed Catamol just in the middle, just to control things.
Well,
Get
exactly. Yeah.
rally the troops. But in case you're wondering, Lee Johnson, League One's answer to Pep Guardiola, you heard it first in this pod, and I'm sure you'll hear it again in the coming weeks. Sunderland continue to have a positive season. Kind of going on to the actual topic today, I want to discuss the 39th game or playing Premier League games abroad because it's one of those things that, like, ever since the Super League ended, like, and Project Big Six as well, like, there's all these incentives, is that the Premier League want to make more money, right? In short,
Mm.
that's kind of what they want to do. Richest league in the world. That seems to be accelerating, and it's a global business. And the chat of there being games abroad is met with backlash and uproar. But it's like, are you surprised? You're getting
Mm.
guys in like the middle of Q8, like wearing Man United tops. Like, do you not think that they would want to capitalize on that? You can't compare it to any other sports. You can't compare it to rugby. You can't even NFL being here. NFL is literally, it's got fans around the world, nowhere near as many as football. Nowhere
Mm.
near. So, it's no surprise to see it rear its head again. So I thought it'd be interesting to do an episode on it to see the pros and cons and whether we actually expect to see it happen. I could definitely see it happening in our lifetime.
Mm.
To what extent, I don't know, because obviously the main money areas aren't, they're not going to do it in France. they're gonna do it in America, Australia, India,
Mm.
potentially South Africa, maybe places like that, rather than your European countries, which you already get in the Champions League.
Yeah, it feels like ages ago this topic came to the fore because, as you said, I mean, it feels like ages ago. Like the US has been touted, parts of Asia, but even back then, like this is you're talking probably over 10 years ago. So football's even grown so much since then. So like now, it's almost like additional places in the world that we could potentially have it. China's had an explosion of football. Other parts of Asia, Africa is continuously growing rapidly in football. So I wonder where it's going to be. You mentioned NFL, but it's a good point. I mean, NFL's played almost exclusively in America. So the fact that they have, or I guess the fact that they have more of a demand or more of a need to try and get the sport outside of America, because that's almost like if you think about like the reasons why, and we'll go into it, but the reasons why the Premier League want to branch the Premier League out, the Premier League directors want to branch out the league overseas, that must be like tenfold for NFL because they've not only have they pretty much to an extent exclusively their fan base is all in America. So for them, their growth potential is even more limited. You'd think they would be trying to move out even further. So it doesn't surprise me that we've got these games in London. I think there was talk about a London franchise at one stage, but I mean it's a bit far fetched. Um, but yeah, I mean there's no surprise that the Prem want to branch out to places like India, for example, where there's just you've got over a billion people or close to a billion people. And even if 1% of those are interested in watching the Premier League, and that's a huge market.
Yeah, you know what would be really interesting as well, now that we touched on NFL? Imagine if there was a hockey franchise in London, because Jordan, I know you love hockey.
This is such a myth.
Yeah.
This is such a myth.
So, for those of you that don't know, Dryden has two loves in his life: football and hockey, ice hockey as well, not field hockey, just in case you're wondering. So, if there was ever a franchise here, very talented ice hockey player as well, even though he's never played before in his life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Got the build for it. I mean, I basically had NHL like 15 when I was like 13. And this is actually, to be fair, I did buy it in lockdown, so I'm talking rubbish. But I basically had the video game franchise like 3 times, and apparently I love it. But anyway, we digress.
Yeah, we digress indeed. So the fuss is, or generally why this has kind of come up is, the original idea which you touched on was this 39th game way back in 2008, when the Premier League executive at the time, Richard Scudamore, they wanted to do their normal round robin thing, playing 38 fixtures where an extra game will be played or supposed to be played in January to escape the extreme colds of England. I mean, even that in itself as a statement, because I've read that online, is just ridiculous. Because when all 20, sorry, Premier League clubs have undersoil heating, like what? Do you know what I mean?
It's not -20 as well.
Oh, it's 2 degrees. Let's play in Dubai. It's like, you know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But anyway, the FAs of countries came forward to host the games. We had countries in the Middle East, which is where we expect it to be. South Asia, North America were all in the running. The chairman for all of these clubs are really interested, but then obviously the managers are far less keen because managers traditionally, as well as players, and managers in particular, love to moan. I would say the average manager in the
Mm.
Premier League is happy after the win for about 2 minutes and they're back to moaning and complaining again. So yeah, it was meant to be incorporated during the 2010-2011 season, but yeah, as I said, managers were unhappy. They didn't want it played across halfway around the world. UEFA nor FIFA were very happy about it either, which was interesting. So then obviously fast forward 10 years, and it's believed that many of the clubs are still quite keen to have something similar, although the proposition now is a bit different. Now they want to have a substantial number of games abroad. But again, the rumours are, as very recently as of last week, the Premier League has called its interest. Now that's not a surprise because I think the Premier League has watched very closely at Project Big Picture, which everyone's forgotten about. That's when the 9 biggest clubs or 8 biggest clubs in England were meant to like control all of the rights to the Prem. I think
Yeah.
now they need 14 of the 20 to vote, but I think they're going to give all of the power to 8, which didn't make any sense. Essentially, it's like a power grabbing exercise. And that failed. And then obviously we've seen the Super League fail. So I'm not surprised the Premier League has called their interest because I know that fans within this country, which we'll come on to later, really, 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 really don't want this going ahead.
Mm.
And I think that the power of fans was underestimated with the Super League nonsense. So I think they're a bit hesitant to do it. Having said that, though, if the Premier League was to move abroad, it wouldn't be the first one to do so. Supercoppa Italiana has already been played in Saudi Arabia. And a La Liga fixture between
Mm.
Barca and Girona was meant to be played in Miami before the pandemic struck. Although fans from both sides are threatening legal action. Can you imagine though, right? Can you actually imagine, like, if AST is Arsenal Supporters Trust, imagine if they just bopped out and were like, yeah, all right, we're taking Emery to court for bad football. I wasted my money and my time. It's fraudulent behavior. Like I couldn't get more information on the grounds as to what they'd be taking them to court over. I actually had no idea, but I just find it mad. What this firm of Barcelona fans? Obviously, it would be figureheaded by a legal team, but just thinking now, you know what, you're going to get taken to court for it. I thought that's quite mad.
Yeah, I don't know, like consumer rights or something, if they bought season tickets, et cetera. I don't know, like, it's just it's a bit mad. I mean, I had no idea that was gonna go ahead actually, that Barcelona game in Miami. But, your point in the Super League, I think, is really apt. Like, I feel as if the Super League in this context is like a double-edged sword for the Premier League, because the Super League has kind of brought out this, um well, a lot of sentiment in this country against this sort of thing of having the big teams in Europe grab power, grab all the revenue, and it just being a very exclusive party for them. But at the same time, a lot after the Super League were kind of tarnished, you had those people, and it was a minority, maybe it's across Europe. Particularly, I saw a lot of journalists, I mentioned this before, relate to Serie A, talking about how, "Oh, no, it's not fair that all these Premier League clubs are pulled out now that their fans don't want it because, you know, their league is basically taking the dominant share. No other league has got a chance, Serie A being a good example of that." So for the Premier League, it seems like a double-edged sword. But, I guess the concern from fans is, like, a potential precedent being set because, like, if this 39th game goes ahead and they make loads of money from it, what, they're just gonna keep it 39 games? They already make loads of money, and yet that's not enough. So I think that's the issue. Is like, okay, well, if they play a 39th game or one of the cup competitions gets taken abroad, when's it gonna stop? Suddenly we're gonna have this, like, international league. And it's ironic, as it is almost ironic, the Premier League are against Super League, but actually what they're doing isn't wholly, like, motivation-wise, it's not wholly too dissimilar to what they're doing in the Super League, trying to basically band together and access other markets. That's essentially what Premier League are doing on their own. So it is a bit mad. But yeah, and there's another factor I think as well. Like, if you do have this 39th game, it ain't going to be Brighton against Newcastle, is it? In Doha.
Yes,
It's
yes, it will, mate.
it's not.
Yes, it will. What, Steve Bruce against Graham Potter? Managerial clash of the century. That's going to be happening for sure. Don't you worry about that.
Oh, on a side note, you must have seen the video or the meme of Steve Bruce outpacing the rest of the Newcastle players on FIFA 22 from the
Yeah,
bench.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That was hilarious, man. Good. He's got wheels in him. I do get what you mean. Like, I think part of the problem with football is that clubs that are out of the loop always complain, saying, "Oh, what about the fans? This isn't right." But I think most of the Premier League clubs, I'd say probably most of the Championship clubs, and I'd say half of League One clubs, depending on the size of the structure, Sunderland definitely, if they're involved in it, they'll do it. The clubs doing
Yeah.
things for the fans no longer exist. Like clubs that say they are hiding behind it. Like I'm hearing West Ham complaining about the Super League. Oh yeah, if you were invited in, they would have jumped on it straight away. Are you
Yeah.
mad?
What?
Uh,
Golden Sullivan. Definitely.
Super League. No, we're about the fans. Oh yeah, they've rioted about
Mm.
they've rioted about more times in recent times than any other club. Like I just think it's one of those where yeah, I think the Prem will eventually get their way, and when does it end or where does it end? Until there's legislation put in place, I'm not too sure about that. But looking at the reasons as to why they'd want to play abroad, obviously you've already touched on that, is money. They want to sell premium tickets abroad to capitalize on their fame and their interest abroad, and they want to grow. That's
Mm.
another big thing as well. Is Arsenal don't want to stop growing now. Man United don't want to stop growing now. They want to cover every corner of the planet. Then for the emerging teams, your Leicesters, even your Tottenhams to a degree, they're thinking, right, how do we grow even more? We want to become a
Mm.
bigger force in the world, and that will benefit us if we have more of a presence in Australia or if we have a bigger presence in America. So all of these clubs want a piece of the pie. So that's why playing abroad. If Leicester go abroad and beat Manchester City 6-0, then fans there will be like, oh, I support Leicester City now. Because all these
Mm.
fans internationally and fans here as well follow winning teams. It's no coincidence that, most international fans kind of support Man United or Chelsea or Arsenal. Because
Yeah.
in that bracket of young adults around our age, they were the biggest teams then, and Liverpool as well before that. I think Liverpool probably just was slightly before the globalization of the Premier League, but
Mm.
still are a household name. And now that they've won the leagues, now I'm sure that there's a future batch of tiny little fans around the globe that now love Mo Salah or even called Mo Salah. I don't know what their parents are naming kids these days. So I think that's definitely one of them. And another one as well is, this is more of a wholesome point, but I don't think clubs think this way. It's trying to reach out to their fan bases across the world. I think there is a selfish point of view in England that, like, I get supporting your local team, and I do understand how important it is to people. But that doesn't mean that, just because you support Arsenal in America, you can't watch them. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's
Mm,
definitely an argument there, because I understand that that doesn't then mean that you should price out your local fans, which I think is happening, which I'll come on to later. But there definitely is an element of, we have to cater to this market. We can't just say, oh, Darren, like, why don't you just watch us at 3 a.m. in Australia playing week in, week out, when,
mm,
someone like Darren probably deserves to watch them play, because we spoke about what it means to be a fan. And that definitely ties into it, like, you've got guys who are season tickets who don't really care about the football that they're watching, and you've got guys who'd kill for that ticket, but
mm,
unfortunately don't live in England. So
yeah.
there's definitely a point there. I think also, following on from the money, all of the photo shoots, the meet and greets, the adverts, the ones where it's like Fly Emirates and they're kicking a ball in the plane, and it's like, oh, there's
Mm.
Messi, and he doesn't really speak English, but he's speaking English in the advert. And it's like, do you know what I mean? It's like, it's just one of
Mm.
those things where it's such a marketing opportunity as well, that I think clubs would be silly to do it. And um, yeah, I just kind of feel like there definitely are positives. I just don't know if there's that many positives for your home based fan. I think for the clubs, well, the reason why the clubs are pushing it is because they see the benefits, right? Managers are saying, "Oh, we
Mm.
don't want to play it abroad or whatever." I get that, but pre-seasons are already miles away. I remember when Wenger, Arsenal used to traditionally have their pre-seasons in Europe because you didn't want to go far. Now Arsenal are going all across the world, so it'll be interesting to kind of see how that progresses.
And also, there's a point I've possibly made before. I can't really recall, but I support a team that's not in the Premier League, but I still like the fact that the Premier League is the biggest league in the world. You probably do too. More pertinent for you because you're an Arsenal fan, but we do all that. I mean, English fans do look like the fact that the Premier League is the biggest in the world and the most exciting to a degree or whatever, and the biggest franchise, some of the best players are now more and more seemingly migrating there. We've had Lukaku, Ronaldo come in recent months. So can we complain that it plans to once again, capitalize on its success to date, its brand, and boost it out further? Like, I understand why fans are upset about things that happen, but at the same time, A, we can't be surprised, and B, like, the time to complain about the Premier League's growth was probably in the 90s. That was the time to complain. Now we're just getting to the point now where it's overflowing from our British Isles, and now we're complaining about it. But actually, we've loved it for so many years, so we're all kind of guilty of possibly getting carried away with the Premier League. But now that it's perhaps leaving us in some form, now we're spitting our dummies out.
Yeah, definitely. It's like some Italian podcasts we follow online were saying, we have to stop the Premier League. It's getting too big. It's like, oh, give it a
Mm,
rest, man. Like in the 90s, Italy was spending all sorts of money on various players
yeah,
and various clubs. When you study football, well, I say study because we're born in 94 and 93. So obviously the 80s and even some of the 90s football we weren't aware of. But, back then you were seeing Eastern Europe were a huge force. All these teams, Yugoslavia, USSR, Russia after that, even Croatia, 98 with Suker. I know Croatia have been quite good recently, but you had all of these teams like Red Star Belgrade winning the Champions League, and like Dynamo Moscow being a force, and Spartak Moscow, and now they've
mm,
all been weeded out. Then it's moved on to Western Europe, and it's the same really. Like people, the time to intervene with the growth of these leagues is long
yeah, yeah,
gone now,
definitely,
like
hundred
long gone.
percent.
Like now that you can't really stop it. But as I said, that's a topic for another day. I think one of the next points kind of look at is, why would you not want to play abroad? Which I think if you ask any fan in England, they could give you about 1,000 reasons. But we'll give you a few on here. And probably the easiest one is different time zones. I definitely think in a competitive thing like the Premier League, managers would be booting off. If Arsenal, okay, let's
Mm,
let's give a more realistic example. If City were potentially winning the league and played two games abroad, one was in, let's say, Doha, and the other was in Paris. No, not Paris. One was in
mm,
Doha, one was in, let's say, Australia. But and then we'll say that Liverpool had two games, one in Dubai, one in Saudi Arabia. Guardiola would be screaming. He would be he would honestly be screaming if that happened, because he would say, well, it's a massive disadvantage. You're like, how can we,
Mm,
with different time zones, how can we schedule those two games abroad when Liverpool have a much shorter mileage, much shorter difference in time zone, and therefore have an advantage? I think, a similar point as well is, let's say we go to Thailand, where Leicester are massive,
mm,
and Arsenal are the home team there because that's how they've drawn it, and they face Leicester. I'm sure they wouldn't do that deliberately for Leicester, but they may go to another area, let's say Doha again, and by chance Arsenal have a much stronger following in Doha, but they're the away team. How does that benefit Leicester, who they're playing? The
mm.
whole point of a home stadium is it's got the most of your fans and it gives you that boost. You've seen people go to Anfield. I've even seen the Emirates rock from time to time, Old Trafford, Stadium of Light, all
Yeah.
of these stadiums. I think when a home crowd really get behind the team, and you've got 30, 40, 50, 60, 70,000 people there, makes a big difference. If 60,000 of the so-called home support don't support you, then how is that an advantage? You
Mm,
can't, you can't have that either, really. And there's no way you can control that because the Premier League don't definitively know. Plus, the top six predominantly are going to be better supported in these countries. So it takes it away from the Brightons potentially,
yep.
or the West Hams, or definitely the Brentfords. I can't imagine Brentford have a huge following abroad. So that's another point as well. I think the strain on players, player welfare is always discussed about. They're always saying they play too much and not enough rest. And Wenger's saying let's do a World Cup every 2 weeks. Yeah, that's right, 2 weeks, not 2 years. He wants to do it every 2 weeks. So there's an issue with that, with more flying. Again, pushing it more towards the elite players, because I'm aware that there are some Prem players that are only playing roughly 45 games a year, and that's if they have deep cup runs. But then you've got your Mo Salahs, and not even Mo Salah, you've got your European players. So your Phil Fodens, really, your Phil Fodens and your Ferran Torreses, that because their international teams are good, they're playing like 65, 70 games a season.
Mm,
And when do they rest? Is kind
yeah.
of the problem as well. I mean, we saw that thing with Pedri. Well, how many games did he go and play? Like, he played in the Olympics, played in the Euros, had a 1 week holiday, and then was back at Barca. It's not healthy, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not. That guy's played about 70 games in a calendar year. It's absolutely crazy.
It's not healthy, and we've seen the likes of Jack Wilshere and mismanaging of youth talent as well as aging talent as well, and it's just not really the one. And also as well, the final point is, are we taking the game away from fans who are struggling to see their favorite sides play locally? There is a big thing we discussed it the other day where Arsenal is very expensive to watch. Like, what? What? It should not be that I pay more than £1 a minute to watch football. Really,
Mm.
like, what? Are you mad? And the thing is, we could get absolutely whacked up as well. And I'm going to pay more than £1 a minute. I'm going to sit there. Obviously, football's predominantly played in the cold. It's very late summer, predominantly
Yeah.
autumn and winter, very very early spring. And I'm going to sit there. It's about 2 degrees on my Monday evening. I've come from work and I've just watched Arsenal get spanked 3-0, and I've paid £108 for my ticket. Oh yeah, thanks. £108, and that will be one of the cheapest ones. And I know Arsenal is an extreme case, but it's the same everywhere. These local fans are getting priced out to a degree, and it is catering more towards international fans that maybe have more money. And this whole thing about heritage and supporting a community, and are we really seeing that with Premier League clubs? I think even if they didn't play abroad, though, they still wouldn't cater to local fans. That's just wishful
Yeah.
thinking. But
Mm.
it is definitely a point. I look at Arsenal's grounds, and I think this could be the same for a lot of London teams. I wouldn't say it reflects Finsbury Park as an area in terms of the people that are
Mm.
there, the mixes, the culture, in terms of the ethnicities. It's not what you'd expect. And I think there's definitely an element of, you know, the Premier League in particular are really driving away from the local fans that kind of made them what they are.
Yeah, there's the whole corporate element as well, which you get a lot more in London than you do kind of anywhere else. But even Sunderland, you've got boxes that are bought out by big companies to take. I can't imagine there's too many big companies buying them currently, but over the years, the same at St James's Park, the same at the Emirates, wherever they have so many seats that are reserved for these corporate enterprises that'll pay fortunes to take their clients there, and that's kind of just indicative of how football's kind of become. Your point on the players and the strain, is so apt. I mean, Pedri's played so many games. The strain on them mentally. I remember it wasn't really a point on the games played, but I remember it was Ilkay Gundogan after the Super League got scrapped. Came out. There was a couple of players that came out and said they weren't in favour. I kind of felt it was after the event, so probably pointless. But I think these players, they do need to their lives, their families, their well-beings, their bodies, whatever, their mental health needs to be taken into account a bit more, including the staff as well, and all these people that have got to work with the clubs to make the games happen. And also the climate change argument as well that we mentioned. I won't labour because we mentioned that on our Qatar podcast. But that's a massive factor. I mean, climate change is becoming more and more of a huge global topic in the press, and all football wants to do is play more and more games. I love I don't love it, but to an extent, I love how FIFA are coming out. If FIFA owned the Premier League, they would be doing all sorts to get the games all over the world. They wouldn't care. They want to expand their World Cup that's getting played across 3 countries, and was it 2032 or whatever? It's bonkers, man.
Yeah, very much so. And I think, yeah, you're right. Your point about FIFA, it's just, yeah, yeah, they'll definitely be trying to do it, or put as many games abroad as possible. So the kind of the final question is, will it happen and should it? And actually, no, I've got one more point as well on the Super League with the players. Right, they were every single player in the world. I hope all of them are listening to this pod, even though none of them care. They're all mugs. Not one footballer, right, with the Super League spoke out when it was actually going on. Not one. And
Yeah.
and the only ones that did were at clubs not involved in it. And I know it's like,
Mm.
oh, but they have their contracts there. Look, if you're Mo Salah and the Super League is going on and you disagree with it, Liverpool aren't going to be like, oh yeah, Mo Salah, you tweeted out about the Super League, so we're going to sack you.
Mm.
They're not doing that, are they? Oh yeah, certainly.
Mm.
But I understand. Yeah, okay. There are certain players and clubs, very well paid professionals, that if they did say something, it could reflect poorly. But I was
Yeah.
actually very disappointed at the elite. I'm talking the elite stars in our league that said nothing. And now they're like, oh, it was all ridiculous. It's like, why didn't you say anything then? But anyway, we'll
Mm.
leave that point there. That was me spraying at the hip. Going to
Mm.
will it happen and should it? I think it's a very difficult point to answer. Local fans are constantly talking about the rising costs to see their sides play. They're being priced out, they feel, for corporate as well as international fans who are willing to pay mad prices to see their sides. There's definitely a balancing act between feeding the appetite of those abroad and trying to do more for the fans here. I think the fans here are finished. Like, they don't care. So it's one of those things where in an ideal world, morally we should do more for the local fans, but they don't actually care. So unless if they start not turning up to games, then no one really cares. And actually, when you don't turn up to games, it normally gets filled. It normally gets filled with some of the international fans who want to see them play, or just more fans. There are so many fans
Mm.
of big clubs, especially big teams, where like it's hard to just boycott. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, we're going to boycott the
Mm.
Emirates.
Yeah.
Like, it's really difficult. Like even further down the scale, I definitely feel that there's a happy medium to be had between both of those, but I feel like it's going to go very mad one way towards the international scene, because you can't compare it to watching it on TV. You go to games live all the time, and the atmosphere is brilliant, and it's just even the goal, like to hear all those fans roar for one player and one team, is just something very, very special. But should games
Mm.
actually be abroad? I think it will happen, but should it actually move abroad? I don't think it should. And the reason why I say that is because I think it would disrupt the league too much. I think there's too many dead ringers. So it's very top eight Glens, like not Glens, lens.
Mm.
So like, yeah, great. We've got City versus like Arsenal abroad, but yeah, who wants to see Brentford versus Newcastle? Now, that's not to say they don't have international fans. I'm sure they do, but like, I think the image is, oh, we're going to be going to 100,000 seat stadiums and selling it all out. That is not going to get 100,000 people. I mean,
Mm.
Newcastle versus Brighton or something is going to get you probably a half full field stadium if they work with the clubs very well and look at their strong points of fan bases, because I'm aware that there are certain players at certain clubs which drive a lot of revenue in those places, like Sun in South Korea, Kanu
Mm.
formerly in Nigeria. So if they did stuff like that for certain players at these clubs, then that may work. But I don't think they would do that, and I think it'd be a bit pointless for some of the other sides. But I definitely think there's a balancing act to be had. I mean, we do have the International Champions Cup, which they always play abroad. I don't know how foreign fans feel about it because, yeah, you're seeing your favorite players play. I would never watch Arsenal play in pre-season personally, but maybe that's because I have the option to watch them here. I don't know. There's an element around. I used to go to the Emirates Cup actually. That's a lie, but the Emirates Cup I was never that fussed with because it is pre-season. Like, oh, it's nice to see the players play, but a goal is just like nice. You can see that it's all right. You know, there's still that competitive edge. I think foreign fans unfortunately miss. And it'll be interesting to see whether the Premier League try and appease that or whether they just keep going with the formula they have now.
Yeah, agreed. I think they will press ahead. I think one of the main reasons is because it's not as if like, okay, the Premier League wants to sell some more, well, put a game on into India and wants to generate more fans. It's not as if there's not already fans there. There's loads of fans in South Asia and Africa, even in the United States. So the fans are already there. For them, it's just about bridging the gap. So it's almost just like an easy win for them if they can pull it off. So it's almost like the risk is just not there because they're not starting from scratch. They've got there's millions of fans overseas that support English clubs, support the Premier League as a whole, and so I think it'll happen. It'll also happen because you're going to have, obviously you need to have these unanimous votes now. You talk about the project big picture fallout and stuff, but as you said, the bigger the club in the Premier League, the more sway they have. The bigger the club, the more fans they have overseas. So it's just set up. It's a formula that's set up for this to go ahead. Whether it'll happen in the next couple of years, possibly not. I could see the Community Shield getting moved overseas, perhaps. It's
Yeah,
quite a historic
maybe.
cup that might stop that from happening. I couldn't see like the FA Cup or League Cup going out because again they're historic. No one cares about the League Cup. FA Cup would just be a massive uproar if that got moved overseas for the final or something like that. So yeah, who knows? But it's an interesting topic, and we'll see how it all pans out. So, Etches, thank you so much for pulling together information on the Premier League abroad this week. Thank you guys all for listening. Please subscribe on our platforms. As I mentioned at the start, it'd be great if you could give us a like, give us a share, whatever feels right. If Facebook and Instagram doesn't come back on, or WhatsApp, then read a book, do something wholesome, go for a walk maybe. But yeah, thank you all for listening. Thanks, Ed. Cheers, and good night.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.